Hello and welcome to a special episode of Battle Cry. We are on board French aircraft carrier Charles De Gaulle after it's just completed an exercise with the Indian Navy. The exercise Varuna has been concluded and the aircraft carrier is docked in Goa. Last year we took you on a journey of INS Vikrant, India's first indigenous carrier. And now we are on board to show you what the aircraft carrier that is home to the Rafale marine fighter jets looks like. This is the only aircraft carrier in the world that operates with Rafale. And Rafales are in fact in the race to be part of Indian Navy's fighter fleet.
The Rafale marine jets in action. Part of the French Navy's carrier strike group, including the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Charles De Gaulle. The strike group carried out exercise Varuna with the Indian Navy from January 16th to 20th, followed by a port call in Goa. In the exercise, the French Rafales and Indian Navy's MiG-29s operated together.
The French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle has just completed an exercise with the Indian Navy. Exercise Varuna has just concluded and the aircraft carrier is now docked in Goa. After the exercise, a lot of maintenance work is going on. This is the hangar area. The Rafale fighter aircraft, the marine version, are also on board. They had taken part in the exercise as well. Several other aircraft, including helicopters, surveillance aircraft, also here. This is the hangar area, which can accommodate up to 25 aircraft, which includes about 20 Rafales at one point of time. And this is the lift that carries the aircraft to the flight deck and also other heavy equipment and material that is needed by the personnel. We can see that a lot of material is still being brought down. It's been taken to different tiers. There are two such lifts at this aircraft carrier, and at one point of time, one aircraft carrier can be taken to the flight deck.
Charles de Gaulle is the biggest ship of the French Navy. It's 42,000 tons, 270 meters, with a crew about 1,800 sailors. They are divided in three main categories: the sailors of the ship itself, the sailors of the air wing, about 500. Of course, we have much more autonomy in terms of energy. But other than that, it's really comparable, and that's why we, during the Varuna exercise 2023, we did a lot of exercise with the MiG-29.
A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, Charles de Gaulle combines autonomy of action, flexibility of use, power, mobility and endurance. The ship has a displacement capacity of 45,000 tons and is 4 times the weight of Eiffel Tower. With 264 meters flight deck, it requires a 75 meters runway for the catapult and can carry a crew of 1,700 sailors on board. With 15 decks, the aircraft carrier can travel 1,000 kilometers per day.
This is the navigation bridge of the aircraft carrier, and it's from here that just about everything about this ship is controlled. And this is the commander's seat, easily the most vantage point at the aircraft carrier. From here, a very clear look of what's ahead. Also the flight deck, clear picture from this point of view. At any given point of time, there are 5 to 6 personnel always manning this area, keeping a close watch on what needs to be done, and it's from here that different commands are given to ensure the aircraft carrier not only sails smoothly, but also ensure that the aircraft that have to take off from the flight deck, the speed of the boat is such that those aircraft do not find it difficult to take off and land. With camera person Satya, Abhishek, Bhalla in Goa for India Today. At a time when the Indian Navy is looking at enhancing its fighter fleet and has given indications that Rafale could be the choice for the Indian Navy, we will take you to this journey of Charles De Gaulle, which is the only home for the Rafale Marines. Take a look at this report.
Charles De Gaulle, home to the naval Rafale fighter jets. 20 of these are on board at any given point of time. The air wing consisting of Rafale marine jets, E-2C Hawkeye aircraft, Dolphin helicopter, Cayman marine helicopter gives the aircraft carrier the punch to dominate the seas.
There are 20 Rafale marine fighter aircraft on board the Charles De Gaulle at this point of time, but officials say that the numbers can be taken up to 30 if required. This is obviously in addition to several other helicopters and surveillance aircraft that are needed on board. At this point of time, the Indian Navy is also looking to have either the Rafale Marines or Boeing's Super Hornet for its fleet. The tests have been conducted, and very soon the Indian Navy will zero down on which fighter aircraft they will be using for their new aircraft carrier INS Vikrant.
It's not just the fighter aircraft, but other elements of the air wing that add to the strength. Be it anti-submarine warfare or reconnaissance and surveillance.
Anti-submarine warfare is an integral part for any aircraft carrier, and this helicopter specializes at that. This is the NH-90 or the French Caimau, which is on board the Charles De Gaulle, and it has a dual role. It's not just an anti-submarine warfare helicopter, and a potent one, but it's also used for transport of personnel as well as material. So it can transport about 20 to 25 persons at one point of time. It's equipped with 2 torpedoes that can take down submarines, and at the same time it has a capacity of about 3 tons to transport and bring crucial material on board the aircraft carrier. There are various aircraft on board, not just the fighter aircraft Rafale, but also, rescue and relief missions can be extremely important, and for that you want a specialized machine such as this. The French Dauphin is a very crucial player of rescue and relief missions. It can accommodate several deep-sea divers, and if at any point of time, there is an emergency, it is this helicopter that is pressed into action. And in the recently concluded exercise, these aspects were also part of the joint operations carried out by Indian and the French navies.
The aircraft carrier Charles De Gaulle, whose main mission is control of air and maritime space along with power projection. The Indian Navy is on the verge of finalizing its choice for 26 naval fighter aircraft. It could be the Rafale. The fight remains between Rafale and Super Hornet. It's likely to be a government-to-government deal like the one for getting 36 Rafale jets for the Indian Air Force.
I've been flying the Rafale for 10 years, and I will not exchange this jet against any other one. It has been initially designed to operate from the carrier. So the first version was this one, the Navy version, and then it was converted and adapted for the Air Force. So it's robust enough. The flight control system are designed to be able to land on the ship, to be catapulted from the ship. So it's a full system integrated with the Charles De Gaulle, and the Charles De Gaulle has been built around the Rafale as well. So there is a link between the two programs. It has been a link during the generation of the two main assets. So yeah, it is very efficient.
The Indian Navy has carried out trials of both the aircraft from its shore-based facility, INS Hansa in Goa, which is a replica of an aircraft carrier deck.
It's a well-proven equipment, as you can see on the deck of this nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. I mean, it's the jet that's been used by our Navy for operation for years exclusively, and we feel that it stands very good chances. I mean, it's been tested in the city of Goa in January on the ramp, and it seemed that the tests were positive and conclusive, so that's exactly where things stand.
The Indian Navy has two aircraft carriers that have a stow bar mechanism, but this is a cato bar mechanism on the Charles De Gaulle. What are the advantages of a cato bar mechanism, and why the Indian Navy wants to have the third aircraft carrier with the cato bar mechanism? But there are several cost constraints. Take a look at this report to understand what is better, a cato bar or a stow bar aircraft carrier.
The Indian Navy inducted its first indigenous aircraft carrier INS Vikrant last year. India now has two functional aircraft carriers, INS Vikrant and INS Vikramaditya. But here's one big difference between the Indian carriers and Charles De Gaulle. While the French carrier operating with Rafales operates with cato bar or the catapult takeoff but arrested recovery mechanism, the Indian carriers use the stow bar, short takeoff but arrested recovery. The cato bar has a flat deck while the stow bar comes to a ski jump.
The entire length of this flight deck is 264 meters, but we are right now at the runway, which is 75 meters long. What is different in this aircraft carrier when compared to what the Indian Navy has? This is a cato bar aircraft carrier, and this is the place from where the aircraft are actually launched. It takes only 3 seconds for an aircraft to be launched, and that's one big advantage of the cato bar style of launching, where there is in fact a catapult kind of pull to the aircraft that helps it to be launched very quickly. And this little cabin, it has just 2 seats, is from where this catapult system is closely monitored. The entire mechanism is in fact beneath the flight deck. And what is also special about the flight deck here is that it has 2 such launchers. So at one point of time, within 3 seconds, 2 aircraft are at full speed of 260 kilometers per hour. This is what makes the cato bar system very different from what the Indian Navy is using. The cato bar system obviously is much more expensive, but the Indian Navy has 2 stow bar systems for their aircraft carriers, but this one has a cato bar system. And another special aspect is that within 30 seconds, the next aircraft can be launched because of this cato bar system on board.
The Indian Navy was hoping to get a cato bar carrier as the third one, but cost constraints means they will have to settle for a stow bar if at all there is a clearance from the government. Catobar carrier can have a bigger impact as it increases range, has more weapons and can operate at a variety of aircraft. Both Super Hornet and Rafale are suited for Catobar carriers. However, they were tested on Navy's shore-based facility in Goa that has a ski jump and is identical to the two aircraft carriers India has.
We saw during this Varuna exercise that we have the same skills for learning fighters on carriers. And the Vikrant will use also the same method to learn its fighters on its angle deck. The main difference relies on the takeoff with no catapults and a ski jump that differs by the method to launch the aircraft. But other than that, it's about the same principles.
A Stobar, due to less space, cannot accommodate surveillance aircraft like the Charles De Gaulle. A Catobar carrier can launch aircraft with more payload at a quicker pace, but the maintenance costs are higher. Indian Navy had envisaged a third carrier or indigenous aircraft carrier 2 with the proposed name of INS Vishal, which simply means massive. This was expected to be a 65,000-ton warship with the capacity to accommodate more aircraft on board, but it has been put on hold due to budget constraints.
The Indo-French cooperation is banking big time on this deal. If, like the 36 Rafales that were brought in through a government-to-government deal for the Indian Air Force, a similar arrangement can be struck, then the Indo-French cooperation will definitely reach different levels. Will it be the Rafale Marine or the Super Hornet of the Boeing that will make the cut? Here is a report.
A sight that enthralled aviation buffs across the world. A US Navy FA-18 Super Hornet thrown out over the Arabian Sea by an Indian Navy ski jump ramp at its Goa air station. A series of flights earlier this year to prove to the Indian Navy that the American fighter was a fine fit for India's aircraft carriers. But the Super Hornet hasn't been the only one devouring Goa's legendary salty air. French Navy Rafale jets also flew in to flex muscle in Goa and show off their ability to meet the Indian Navy's specific needs. The two foreign fighters are in an official face-off to win an Indian Navy contract for anywhere between 30 to 50 fighters. Called the Multi-Role Carrier-Based Fighter or MRCBF contest, things are now speeding up on this program. For starters, these two jets are the only two active contenders capable of operating off the Indian Navy's new indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant. But things aren't as smooth as Boeing and Dassault, the two aviation giants that make the two contenders, would have hoped. For starters, both the Super Hornet and Rafale are relatively large jets, and there have been concerns if they can be transported safely on the small aircraft lifts built into the INS Vikrant. Recognizing these concerns, the makers of both aircraft have separately reassured the Indian Navy that there would be no problem. But there's another issue. Given that both the Rafale and Super Hornet are flung into the air traditionally using a steam catapult launch system on the aircraft carriers of their respective nations, the Goa trials were designed to settle this doubt once and for all in India. The Indian Navy's quest for a modern fighter for its aircraft carriers isn't an isolated effort, but tied quite directly to the Indian Air Force's separate acquisition effort for 114 multi-role fighters of its own. Both the Super Hornet and Rafale are in contention for the much larger Indian Air Force requirement as well. While Team Rafale hopes it already has a first mover advantage, since the Indian Air Force already operates 2 squadrons of the French fighter, Team Super Hornet believes close India-US ties and a giant industrial partnership package could swing the deal Washington's way. But in India's defense procurement labyrinth, nothing is over until it's over. And the question remains, will the Indian Navy be forced to look abroad once again for fighter jets? Or could the solution to its combat fleet needs be met from within India itself? Stay tuned to Battle Cry as we now show you what India's own aviation complex is offering to the Indian Navy.